Welcome to Boys in the Hood TV. Today we tapping into the streets of LA, and we're gonna be looking at two Rollin 60s Crips who was hired to kill an auto body shop owner over a botched job. Now the Rollin 60s Crips is one of the largest African-American street gangs in Los Angeles and one of the most dangerous. Stemming all the way back from the 70s, the 60s have a fierce reputation in the streets for committing murders, robberies, stabbings, carjackings, extortion, and many other illegal activities. Now back in the 80s, Rollin 60 members were known for getting money through various means by robbing jewelry stores, banks, and etc. But one Rollin 60 member in particular, by the name of Big Joe Rat, who was a known hustler and one of the first Rollin 60 members to become a millionaire during the crack era, would popularize the term Rich Rollin.
But what brought Rich Rollin to the forefront, that phrase, is when he put it on the back of the El Camino. Rich Rollin, that shit went around the town. Joe Rat, the one who made it famous.
Now, like anybody growing up in the hood, everybody wants to get that money, but everybody wants it fast. And as we all know, fast money comes with risk. Now, some gang members choose to sell dope, others choose to rob. Then there are times where history has shown us when it comes to the Rollin 60s, members have been hired as hitman to kill for money. One of the most notorious Rollin 60 Crips is Lil Fee, who was paid to kill a woman who was suing a club owner over a shooting. But instead of killing a woman, he mistakenly went to the wrong house and killed the entire family of NFL football player Kermit Alexander. But in 2013, we would see the Rollin 60s once again do a murder for hire. And on April 18, 2013, Rollin 60 Crip Derek Breedlove contacted a fellow 60 Crip member by the name of Calvin Kirkpatrick, who had just got out of prison for a job to make some quick money. Now Breedlove would text Calvin and let him know that one of the homies named Cuzzo was paying $3K for a job. That job would include shooting the individual below the waist. But Breedlove also in that text message would tell Calvin, do what you gotta do. Simply put, whatever happens, happens. Now Calvin would agree to these terms. Breedlove would then go on to tell Calvin that he would supply the guns and he would also follow the target to learn his routine, to learn what type of vehicle he drive so that Calvin could know where to hit him. Now the intended target was John Kennedy, the owner of Bowtie Connections. Now Rollin 60 Crip member Cuzzo was upset about body work that was done to his car and he wanted to teach him a lesson. 3 weeks later, on May 7, 2013, Rollin 60 Crip member Calvin would arrive at Breedlove's apartment at around 7 a.m. About 30 minutes later, at 7:30, surveillance footage would show Calvin leaving from the apartment wearing a dark hoodie with gloves and a mask, walking towards the auto body shop, which was only 3 blocks away from Breedlove's apartment. Not long after, an auto body shop worker named Ryan Yazin would spot a suspicious person sitting at a bus stop wearing a hoodie with a dust mask and gloves. And of course, that was Rollin 60 Crip Calvin. Now at around 8 a.m., Kennedy's pickup truck would arrive to Bowtie Connections and park directly in front. The truck door would open, but Kennedy wasn't driving the truck. It was one of his longtime workers, Richard Trujillo Vidori. Now Richard had borrowed Kennedy's truck because his vehicle had broke down and it was currently in the shop. But as Richard got out of the car to head towards the shop, Calvin would make his way across the street. And as he approached Richard from behind, he would put the barrel of the gun directly to the back of his head and open fire. Richard would be hit one time in the head and collapse on the pavement as Calvin took off running. The shop workers who witnessed it would immediately call 911. Calvin would be spotted running through a parking lot to a nearby alleyway where he would toss the gun into a dumpster. Moments later, surveillance would spot him going inside Breedlove's apartment. Not long after, police would arrive to the auto body shop where Richard Vidori would be pronounced dead. Detectives would immediately start interviewing witnesses, which included the workers at the shop. Each one would tell them how they saw a man wearing a dark hoodie with gloves and a face mask run towards Richard and shoot him and then head towards the alleyway. The police would immediately start to canvass the area, which included nearby Breedlove's apartment. Now surveillance footage would show Breedlove stepping outside of his apartment, pacing back and forth before running back inside after seeing a nearby patrol car pass by him. Inside the apartment lobby, Breedlove could be seen pacing back and forth once again, but this time checking his phone while looking out the window. Breedlove in that moment was texting Calvin to let him know that the scene was clearing up. Now, eventually, detectives would obtain the nearby footage from those surveillance cameras, including the one directly across the street from Breedlove's apartment. Once the detective looked over those surveillance tapes, they would identify both Breedlove and Calvin as the suspects. Now, this would lead officers to digging into both Rollin 60 Crip members. Detectives would then discover that 6 days later, that Breedlove and Calvin would both purchase new vehicles, and Calvin would also get a new cell phone along with a gym membership. Eventually, detectives would obtain a warrant to get the phone records for both Breedlove and Calvin, and they would discover their conversation about the murder for hire and every little detail that they had discussed. Not long after, Breedlove and Calvin would be arrested in connection with the murder of Richard. Breedlove and Calvin would be tried together, but they would use separate jurors. Multiple eyewitnesses would come forward once again to testify, which included the workers from the Auto Connection shop. They would testify that every morning, either Richard or Kennedy, the shop's owner, would be the one to open the shop to start the business up for that day. Now, the coroner report would reveal that Richard died instantly and that contact was made from the barrel of the gun to the back of the head. A gang expert would also testify that both Calvin and Breedlove were members of the Rollin 60 Crips, who both had long criminal histories. The defense would allow Calvin to testify on his own behalf. Now, Calvin would claim that he and Breedlove and a man named Keon Collins, aka Cuzzo, who all met in jail, had devised a game plan to sell weed out of state. But sometime later, Calvin claimed he was contacted by Cuzzo directly about a job which involved shooting the auto shop owner by the name of John Kennedy in the legs. But Calvin claimed that he told Cuzzo that he didn't feel comfortable shooting him, but instead, for a smaller payment, he would break both of his legs. Now, Calvin will go on to admit that he was at Breedlove's apartment the morning of the shooting, but only to prepare to sell the weed that Breedlove had at his apartment. But he also will go on to admit that he was the man seen on camera heading to the body shop. He will go on to state that he did wait at the bus stop for Kennedy, but Kennedy never showed up, and that when he saw a police car pass by him, he got nervous and he left around at 8:15 a.m., which was right before the shooting of Richard. Now, after Calvin gave his testimony, the jury will begin deliberation. And 2 days will go by, and the jury will finally reach a verdict, and they will find Calvin Kirkpatrick guilty of first-degree murder, and he will be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Derek Breedlove would also be found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, Keon Collins, aka Cuzzo, was never charged in connection with this murder. I would like to thank everybody for tapping in, and I'll see y'all next time.